Okay, I'm ready.
Just need the slides up.
So here we are. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Catherine Davis. And as Welsh said, thank you, by the way, for the introduction. I come from Cardiff, but I now live in Login, which is near Whitland in the west of this country, very close to where Mum was brought up, so lots of family connections still there. I'm delighted living out in the country, but I love being a theatre, I love travelling, I love learning languages, and I've had the opportunity to work and train abroad quite a lot, and that's how I speak all these different languages. So I learned Swedish when I was studying to be a tailor in Finland, and I speak Spanish and Catalan after having done a master's degree in costume design for opera in Barcelona. So Barcelona for about 7 years altogether. And the first slide shows a picture of me wearing a coat I made recently for an art project for tailoring. And I've just finished it with Melindra Gwyn, which I'll be talking about later on. But the second slide, please.
Oh, Catherine, sorry.
Catherine, sorry, you're on mute.
Aros meiliad, falle bod na rhywun wedi gwysgu
is that okay? Yeah, you're back. So yeah, I specialise in tailoring, costumes and sustainable fashion, and that word sustainable is extremely important for me. I try and live in a sustainable way, and environmental issues are very important to me too, not just the way I work. So I make a real effort to recycle, reuse both materials and source them locally, morally important to me. And I'm building a small studio called Tailor Bath, the Little Tailor, in a field near where I live. And that's where my studio is at the moment. It's in the bedroom, but there's not much internet in the studio at the moment. That's why I'm in the kitchen at the moment. So I'm working from home, but the Tailor Bath studio will be built in an eco-friendly manner with solar panels on the roof, and also the water from the roof, we'll have rainwater harvesting. The rainwater from the roof will be pumped back in to the studio. So the Tailor Bath studio next year will be eco-friendly and sustainable too. So I really look forward to that. So the next slide, please. Slide 3, thanks. So traditional tailoring is what I'm absolutely delighted with. I design and cut patterns myself too. So it's all a very slow process. But I do feel passionately about slow fashion and the principles behind it, which is, of course, the aim to create produce of high quality with locally sourced materials, if possible, in a measured way, which is fair to the environment. So tailoring is slow fashion because the craft is a craft that does take a lot of time. And so things are also made to last, and that's really important to me as well. You know, not coats that will also what's important is wool used in tailoring. There's a natural, sustainable material, and that's really important for me as well. So next slide.
Please, Catherine.
So bespoke tailoring. After the master's degree I did in Barcelona, I went on to work in the tailoring department, bespoke tailoring department in a very well-known shop in Barcelona. And so a lot of people, like the football team from Barca, came and had the jackets made there. It was excellent experience. I learned so much in terms of the skills of sewing by hand and tailoring. And this picture, this slide shows a jacket that was made out of traditional Welsh wool. And so the wool has been was actually put together in the woolen mill, with a few woolen mills back in Wales, which specialises in Welsh traditional wool. So I celebrate celebrating the heritage, the woolen heritage of Wales, and the rich materials that are woven here, and it corresponds with the principle of slow fashion. So the next slide. The next slide was is concerned with theatrical tailoring, and my cousin works in the theatre, and therefore there's a lot of experiences of theatrical tailoring, including working in Glyndebourne Opera. And this is a picture of an opera I was working on in Glyndebourne. And in Cardiff I've worked in the Sherman and with inclusive theatre companies such as High Jinks and Taking Flight Theatre Company, designing costumes for actors with disability. And so vast experience of working on different types of theatrical productions and making costumes and designing costumes. And then I moved on to the next slide, adaptive tailoring. And there's a picture here of the waistcoat that Garth is wearing here. Still has got tailor taps in it, as you can see, for the final fitting. Tailored Back offers an adaptive tailoring service for people with special physical needs. And therefore, I can draw together the skills of adapting theatre costumes along with, emergency costume measures in backstage, and bring them together in a creative way. So I think I can draw upon all these different experiences, theatrical and so on, to create clothes for adaptive tailoring. And I think it's really important that when clothes fit, they make you feel good, and it can improve your quality of life too, I think. So the next slide is to do with sustainable tailoring. And I started making coats out of old materials, old Welsh materials. This is made of old blankets. One that Mum had in the cupboard. It was an old over blanket, and stored up in the attic. And the patterns are still as striking, the colours are strong, and they've been woven in the 1940s or 50s. So yeah, this is exhibited and celebrated as a wonderful craftwork of woven blankets. And they're old woven blankets in Welsh wool, because very often now the things that are woven in Wales, the wool doesn't come from Wales, and it's nice to be able to make stuff out of old blankets. So that moves us then to the Blangot project. Now that's something that I've been doing since about 2020. So my project Blangot. So the Blangot project is a social one for sustainable tailoring, and it's in connection with refugees and asylum seekers in Cardiff, and they're supported in many ways being offered food and advice, English lessons, and all sorts of activities. And more than anything, a community has helped to be created for these people who've come to Wales for different reasons, difficult reasons often. And so we make coats out of old blankets or old Welsh woven blankets, and it's been supported by the Ashley Family Foundation. And it's an opportunity for me to share my skills and meet with people from different countries and extend a warm Welsh welcome. So the people taking part, then they learn tailoring skills, and then they improve their language skills and their employability too. And they therefore have a better feeling of well-being out of these blankets. So
slide 9,
which is the next slide, shows an example of one of the coats we're making in Project Langauage. And you can see more pictures on our Instagram page. I've given you the link there on the slide. It's Lisa's coat, and she chose the blanket. And we make the coats out of donated blankets, and the lining and the pockets are made out of dead stock, and that comes from the Recreate Scrap store in Cardiff. It's an amazing place to get materials that are sort of end of stock materials, and therefore very sustainable. And you can't see the lighter bit here, but it was made out of the waste end of a snooker table, and so it's a beautiful green colour. I love using it, the felt, and I love using these scraps of material. And you can choose the blanket for the coat you want, and then there are three styles, three sort of different patterns that we have at the moment. And the next picture, next slide, is showing Gosby. Now she is wearing her coat, and the project is one where, number one, we're aware of where all the materials have come from, but also all the waste in Blancots also goes on to do with smaller things like draft excluders, hot water bottles, and from all these sort of scraps from Blancots. And then we sell those items in the Oasis shop in Cardiff. Oasis I mentioned earlier. And so you can go into the Oasis website in Cardiff and follow the project on Instagram. So moving on to the next slide. And this is the most recent project Blancots are doing, and I love this. It was for an exhibition, and it was a art tailoring project funded by the National Lottery with the Arts Council, and I showed coats there that have been tailored traditionally with a thematic lining printed by hand. And so the coats were made out of a collection of the spirit of the Tregwynt Mill, which is basically a collection of the remains of blankets that show the spirit of the landscape of Wales. And so this picture that we put here shows the use of heathland and the colours like purple and the colour of the heather that grows on the heathland or the moorland. And so I did a lining that would correspond with the theme of the material. So the next slide shows the lining inside the coat. And that was inspired by those mounds of heather growing on the hills, and I made the pattern by then cutting out in stencil fashion and then scanning the pattern, and that's a heck of a process too in creating that screen. So the linings then were printed in the print house, and then I printed the material in the print house too. And so, well, yeah, the whole project was great. I really enjoyed, and yeah, the next slide shows one of the other coats in the series. So this is a Gessi coat that has seed pod prints. So this coat, this purple one, is in a style. Michaela is the lady in this slide, Carla in the other one, and these are women that I've been teaching and working with in the Blanc Oasis project. Keila comes from Honduras and Carla comes from El Salvador. They've been living in Wales for just over a year. And so Wales is the adopted home, new adopted home, and as part of the project then, I gave them a coat each, the warm Welsh welcome, if you like, and a commitment, and linking up with the landscape of Wales and the theme of the project. There's another picture here on the next slide, which shows this is sort of a blue seascape or blue lagoon. Of course, near Cardigan in West Wales, you've got a place called the Blue Lagoon, and this is a coat which is based on a splash explosion. There was a photo shoot in the Blue Lagoon this explosion print, the pattern's got to look a bit like an explosion and a splash because it's associated with a little bit of the history of the Blue Lagoon, because it was created by a channel that connected the slate quarry that was there when it blew and overflowed, and therefore connected with the sea. And so that's the connection with the theme of the material. And I created the pattern with ink and by blowing droplets of ink with a straw. So you can read a little more about the exhibition, even though it's finished now. And the process of creating and tailoring has been documented on Instagram, Tailored Bach, Taylor_Bach. And so, yeah, that's us. Thank you very much for listening. And thanks, Catrin and Gwawr and Steve and the University of South Wales for organising this. And it's just wonderful to be a part of this particular lecture and to promote the use of the Welsh language in the university. I look forward to hearing Angharad and Caris now, and maybe to meet with you one day. Thank you. Thanks very much, Catrin. That was so interesting. I love those colours. And next, I would like to introduce you to Angharad Williams. I'll just unmute. There we are. So Angharad has just graduated from the University of South Wales in 2020. So I won't say too much, but she's going to share with you her experiences as a newly graduated person and as a student.
Yeah, hi.
Well, thanks. As Catrin said, I'm Angharad and I graduated last year. And I've spent the last 3 years learning new skills. It wasn't stuff I'd spent much time before university doing, so it's really interesting. And I firstly, it was the first time that I went on foreign trips. I went to London, I went to Copenhagen to meet with other agencies and people who were former pupils as well, former students. And one of the lecturers that had come in was a guy in a company in Cardiff Bay called Spin Dogs, which is where I work now. So thanks to the university for that. So I met with them when they came in to do an advert for charity, and it was for Shelter Country, and I went out to take pictures of people who were homeless in Cardiff for the Shelter Cymru advert, and I took 3 stills for posters, and I created a video by meeting with a man who was homeless and took him out for a little coffee and just discussed his experiences. So yeah, and on the back of that, I submitted that to Spin Dogs, and they offered me a week's experience with them, and so then it was the first time I had experience working in an agency like that, and working with people in the industry who'd had experiences with advertising. So I'm not a creative person in terms of, you know, if you want to get me to do things, I can colour them in, but I'm not creative in any other way. You know, I like numbers and data and how to be creative in that way. And you know, not normal, I suppose. But it was nice, you know, to be able to speak to people and take up a role in marketing, because from then on in the university I took every brief and adapted it to suit me more. Because, you know, I'm not very good with fine art or drawing, even on a computer either. So what was really good was that the college was so open, and I wanted to create something that I thought would work. So I just chose to work with Shelter Cymru, as I said, and for my end of year project, I did a project with the Welsh government in a campaign where they plant a tree in Wales and in Africa, and for every child born and adopted since 2002, I believe. And I thought that was a lovely idea, where people could go out and find their tree and get it planted. And after that, I went to do another week, another 2 weeks, in fact, with Spin Dogs, and met an online marketing team, a support team, and I was able to see how this agency worked with different teams, and not just creatively, but also with people who were building and making stuff. People were really clever with computers. It all went straight over my head. But it was great to have that opportunity to meet so many different people. And as I said at the beginning, I finished my course and graduated at home, so I finished my course, and got a job with Spin Dogs afterwards, but they weren't in a position to get me started with them immediately, so I went out to get more experiences in the meantime and collect as much experience as I could. And so I started with a company called Untitled Talent, Predicting Talent, and they promote Wales as a place for graduates to come, as a destination for graduates. And it was something, I mean, I was looking for work in Wales, wanted to come here, move and stay here to work, and And it was the first time in a professional manner that I've been able to use the Welsh language. I came from a home that doesn't speak Welsh, and my brother and sister were still in school, and so I didn't really have much chance to speak with them much either. And so it was a really nice experience. As you can see, there's nothing wrong with my Welsh, but it could be even better. And so, apologies for the Wenglish. I think the biggest skill is when you have, English and Welsh sentences are back to front from each other. It's enabled me to look at projects differently. I look at things the other way around because of that. I look for different languages and I can understand a little bit of what they say, and more so than some of my friends who are non-Welsh speaking, who've got only one language to refer to. So I'm quite open-minded about things then, because I can think about these things in a different way and not necessarily one that I understand. So I work now as a graphic digital marketer, and with Spin Dogs I started yesterday, so I'm very new to the job. So at the moment, I learned new skills, I met new people, and that was really nice. And I've been part of, never been part of such a massive team as that before. And so, yeah, I've met a lot of people, and they were really nice. So, yeah, thank you. Asking how things were last year and how they will be, but I hope there'll be more interesting tales to tell. I would love to go to Spain and Barcelona and do that as well. So hopefully, with the years to come, I will have something similar to say. Thank you. Thanks, Angharad. Remember, if you have any questions for the speakers, please put them in the chat room box, and then hopefully we'll be able to have about 5 minutes at the end to ask questions. So next, I'd like to welcome Caris. She's going to talk, and she's a freelance photographer and videographer from Wales. She's back in Wales at the moment. So I'd like to introduce you to Caris, who will speak to you and share her presentation. Okay, hello everyone. I'm Caris Hughes. I'm Welsh lady who normally lives in Dublin, but I also live in Cardiff, and I studied in the University of South Wales about 12 years ago. I've had about 8 years experience in the fashion industry, and worked in different magazines since then. So I am a photographer and a film director and maker, and I work with companies such as Interview Magazine. Doc Martens, Dickies, Dazed, ID, Pool, Girls in Film, Liebeskind, Peach. And Peach. If you're not familiar with some of those names or companies, they're all on your website, so you can look them up there. But before I went freelance, I went full-time freelance to do photography and film back in 2019. But I had been doing freelance work leading up to that, as well as working in-house with with magazines such as Dazed, Another Man, Fact, and music, Red Bull Music Academy. And Welsh language has always been a big part of my identity. I'm a first language Welsh speaker. I speak it with my mum and dad, with most of my friends from Cardiff, and the language has always been a really big part of me and very important to me. But having said that, when I started in the university, I decided to keep that part of my identity to myself. I shrunk the Welsh bit of it, and I think it's when you're around that sort of 20 years of age bracket, you tend to shrink yourself and you try and fit in and match with what other people are doing. I had an experience when I moved to London after graduating. I had an internship and I started working. And after the internship, instead of being proud and blasting the fact that I came from Wales, I actually didn't see that as important, and I tried to fit in with everybody else and assimilate. And so I had an experience of just missing that part of my identity when I was living in London. And honestly, I was talking Welsh and that, with my family and Welsh friends in London too, but I wasn't really seeing that bit of my identity as an important thing to talk about. But of course, now in the last few years, I've noticed how that was not the correct approach, and all those things that make us unique, the language that, is an identifier, it makes us proud, it makes us separate from every other country in the world. And so now, since I've become freelance as an artist and creating my own work, I see the Welsh language and Welshness as a really important part of that. And I try and find ways now of promoting the language within my work. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as I show the projector, but perhaps we can move to the next slide.
Please, Captain.
Thanks, Katrin. Just to show you what my work looks like, these are a couple of examples of some photographic work here. So I work in fashion projects, artistic, generic, but I also do things that are more cool than that, but sometimes I do less cool things just to pay the bills, less complex things. I do projects, editorials and commissions, and I do them through photography and film. And a lot of different projects are seen there, and that gives you a taster of how my work looks. If you go to the next slide, please. Right. So, whilst I was working for the music magazine, I started taking pictures professionally. Now, obviously, I studied photography in university because I studied fashion promotion, but I didn't really take it seriously. I didn't see it as something I wanted to do at the time. And that's because I was focused too much on the technical elements. I'm not a naturally technical person. I'm more visual, and one has to make an effort with the technical side of photography as well. But because I had to do this as part of my job, I was having to think of social media and content and creating content during my job. And so I really pushed myself to learn how to take photos, to learn about how to work under pressure, met with artists or musicians in the studios or on the streets, and had to take portraits of them under a lot of time constraints and pressures. And social media. Yeah, so between things like supplying for their social media magazine and news media, that's where I started taking pictures and realized, wow, this is what I want to do. I did the same sort of job for Red Bull Music Academy, but with that job, I was really fortunate to be able to travel the world. And because Red Bull did projects all over the world, I was like a member of staff in-house, a team of people who travelled across the world to make and do festivals and music projects across the world. So I met an awful lot of people all over the world. I made a lot of contacts over the world, and that was through that office. And it was then I realised how little Wales and the Welsh language are seen, are visual or understood on a global level. There's almost nothing, no awareness of Wales and the language. And that really shocked me. It shocked me, you know, even living in Berlin, how much I had to explain about my own identity in terms of where I came from, the language and so on. And that really opened my eyes. I mean, when I was working for Red Bull Music Academy, I was already knowing that I wanted to go freelance. So I just started thinking about how could I help change this perception? Well, now I want to be one of the people that helps put Wales on the map, and that's something I believe in passionately as part of my work, as well as working on fashion music projects with talent and with people globally. This Welsh dimension to it is an enormous part of my work too. So yeah, this is the first short film I made, and it was done a couple of years ago. But I mentioned a little bit, as well as the problem with lack of awareness of Wales on a global level. I also feel British media and how they represent Wales, I think, to be honest. But Welsh histories and stories are either not represented at all or done in a very inaccurate manner. So sorry, I'm a little bit Wenglish right now. I've been living all over the place, and so as well as all the other projects that I've done, it really helps to tell Welsh stories and ones that have not been said before. Now, obviously, a lot of people know there's a big Italian community in Wales, and that there's a lot of cafes have been opened in Wales, over the country. And when I made a short film about one of these Italian cafes called Station Cafe in the Rhondda, which isn't far from where I grew up. I mean, I say I come from Cardiff. I'm actually from Taftswell, which is a small village, just before where the valleys start, which is sort of sandwiched in the valleys. And the next slide, if you can just play a little bit of this and have a taster of it. Is there any volume? Oh, do you know what? Don't worry about it. I can. I was going to give you links to the films and projects for people to watch them in their own time. But for this, I heard that the cafe was going to close down in 1985 after 55 years of being open, and then I thought, wow, that's cool. It's a great story. And I'd heard that it meant an awful lot to the local community. These were people that had been going there for, you know, there was a lot of history in the cafe, and I wanted to portray all of that before the cafe was to shut. So the next slide. When I went freelance, just a couple of years ago, because I haven't lived in Wales since a long time. I've been living in London and then Germany. I felt that there was very little connection between my identity as Welsh legal and doing these cool projects in Germany. I'd come back to Wales and felt I didn't know people anymore, and that there wasn't much going on in terms of work. So I wanted to change all that and start making connections with artists, other Welsh artists, and people who are doing all these cool things. And there was so much going on in terms of the arts, the music, in the Welsh language alone. There is so many experiences too. And I threw myself into it and started meeting people and worked. And by doing so, I met with Annie Glass, who is a Welsh musician, an amazing Welsh musician, who sings in both English and Welsh, and also Cornish. Speaks Cornish, and she asked me to shoot a music video for a song called Mirores, which is from her first album. It's an amazing song, and it won Welsh Album of the Year last year. It was wonderful to work with Annie, and we decided to have a focus that was a little bit like a fashion show, and it was the first music video that we'd ever done, and it was great to have this opportunity of working with this renowned Welsh artist. In the next slide is an example of the video. I don't know if you'll hear it. So we didn't have much of a budget, so tried shooting it. What we did was, I mean, there was hardly any budget for a music video, and I shot it in the down the street from the village hall. It was real fun working within the village in which I grew up as well. Yeah, it was just great fun experience. Next slide, please. And this is an example of another film I did last year. It was in Berlin, and here are some projects done by a stylist who's sort of American and German, and it's a project which documents people's voices on the ground in the Black Lives Matter protest last year, and it was just to show the kind of work done in other projects too outside of Wales. And if I could just go to the next slide, yeah.
So yeah, just
I've always got a projector in Berlin. Before all the pandemic, I loved the fact that you could travel between two places very easily. And before the pandemic, I made that video with Annie Glass and started also having conversations with other artists and started making other music videos. Of course, the pandemic stopped all that. You couldn't travel, and it just made people, it could create a lot of difficult work, but now things have started to improve, and I've had conversations with Welsh artists and companies and to make music videos at the moment, and so I've also got a project which is one I'm working on now. It's a personal project, my own idea about Welsh speakers in Wales, and I also am working on a project for Film Cymru. There's this initiative at the moment called Cymru and Ewrop Wales in Europe. There's also Welsh people that live in Europe, and I plan on going back there in a couple of weeks.
ma wastad gyda fi lot o stuff yn mynd ymlaen, a dwi jyst yn trio wneud projectau
stuff going on and liking to do personal projects back in Wales, which
necessarily
may not be particularly well paid at all, but they do help with the portfolio and lead on to other works that will be paid. So we'll go to the final slide. I just gave a couple of points of advice together, and that was, I would like to know, things that I'd like to know in university, things that are unique to you as your identity. It's good of you to push them in your work and have a very wide lens, a worldwide lens. It's important for people in Wales to be able to think.
Dwi'n teimlo beth bynnag bod y cyfryngau Prydeinig yn
really British media really let Wales down, and it's all terribly London-centric, and I think very passionately and carefully about how we can get work and stories out there on a worldwide basis and not just relying too much on people in London, because obviously sometimes they I mean, it wouldn't make sense for them to, or they would make a point of representing all the different areas in Britain. And so I feel that there are endless possibilities here, and the language is very much a part of that. And what makes it so special and unique for us as people in Wales is that the language is something that belongs. It belongs to all the people of Wales and all the people who move to Wales and people from other countries who choose to move to Wales. It's as much a part of them as it is of people who speak it. And I think that's something worth celebrating. And it's not done enough, and what we want to do is promote that on a global level with sort of Welsh projects and so on. I think that's about it. And I'd just say thank you. And if anyone wants to say hi or approach me or get advice regarding anything, just feel free to email me, and I'd be happy just to chat with students and people who are like-minded. Well, thank you. Thanks, Caris. I'm just grateful to all three of you. The time has flown. I'm aware that we're a touch running over, but it doesn't matter. I mean, it was an incredible chat. And is there anyone who has any questions for Caris, Angharad, or Catherine? Gwawr. Sorry, I'm always sticking my beak in. That was just brilliant. It was so wonderful to hear from the three of you. When I touch on this question of identity, the three of you have discussed identity in different ways, or principles as things that are important and driving you. How much did that influence you in the work that you do all the time? And how much did you have to stick to a brief? Or is that just part of your work? This is a part of you? Or do you have to actually, fly your flag and say, no, this doesn't fit in with my principles? And do you take that work, so you've got to pay bills? Do you want to ask a bit more about that, if you'd be willing to answer that? For me, as I was saying, there's kind of the elements of Welshness in my identity. I haven't really been including it as part of my identity for too long a time, because I went freelance only a couple of years ago, and the pandemic happened during that time, and so I'm still trying to figure it all out, to be honest. But for me, I'm just always thinking of how ideas can change how to portray Wales and modern Wales on a global level, and different ways of doing that. it's really important for me just to keep one eye open on what's happening and be inspired, and just come up with ideas all the time. Yeah, it's really nice when you're living in other countries, you can see Wales from a different perspective, and you return with a new energy, a different energy too, because you're representing Wales when you're living somewhere else. So yeah, I think I'm just, I've got so many different projects. You do what you want, and then you find a way of funding it. That's what I tend to do now. I get an idea, I kind of find a way of funding it, or working with other people. Yeah, I mean, I just think it's really important. I try and do everything bilingually, and even with things like, you know, with posting on social media, put the Welsh first, then the English, because why not? Because I'm bilingual, it's my first language, I'm just been brought up that way, but I have no problem putting Welsh first on produce. We've been so used to putting it second all this time. Was something, an attitude I wanted to change. You can put it first in Welsh and then you translate into English. And people are interested as well in the language. As you're saying, you go to different countries and people show an interest that you are different and that you can speak another language. Yeah. Well, one thing, if, I mean, as there's so little awareness about the language, I would feel that you know, people have said to me, you've taught me so much about Wales and the language. They used to have a very different perspective of what Britain was and what was happening, and all these different countries in Britain. In fact, we've got a language in Wales, and they didn't know that before they met me. So they are very interested. And one example, this is that I've just been asked to do a radio show for Devil Out. Now, they are a radio company, global one, based in America, and they want me to do a special of Welsh language music for them. So the interest is there, but you just need to do it, tell people and get people to realise what's happening. There are so many artists and cool projects happening here. We just need to put them on a worldwide platform, not just any platform within Wales. Excellent, amazing. There's one question that's come up in the chat room. I think it's for you, Caris, but everyone's welcome.
What influences and drives your photography?
What influences and drives your photography? Oh, that's an interesting question. In terms of it's just people really, and interesting stories, and influences. So what are the influences that drive your photography? Well, for me, it's people and stories, and listening to what people have to say. This is what inspires me mostly. My work was more sort of documentary oriented before I started taking photos, making films, but now I do more work regarding fashion, more stylized pieces, but I'm also influenced by the story people. And I think that comes from being Welsh and being a person who wants to speak Welsh as a first language and hasn't seen stories of my community and what people in my community are doing, and haven't really seen that in the I haven't really seen that in the media in London and so on. So I think that's really influenced me mentally, and I always try and think of, I mean, I think that every person has something interesting to say and a really interesting perspective, and I think people are the focus of my work and the stories behind the pictures. Yeah, well then that's us. I will just say thank you very much on behalf of the whole of the University of South Wales, everybody in the fashion department, everyone who is concerned with organising this, and thank you three for coming to talk to us today and sharing your vast experiences of working in fashion and in all your fields. Your passion for the field, your passion for the Welsh languages is very evident. I'm sure you've inspired a lot of people here today. So thank you again for coming. And thank you, all of you who've joined us today, including students, staff, colleagues, and educators from the different schools and colleges. And it's great to see so many of you here. So yeah, thank you all very much. And I'll say goodbye. Thank you. Thank you. Bye.